Welcome to Dune Chapter by Chapter. I'm Dominic. So in the last chapter that I talked about in Frank Herbert's Dune, it was the introduction of Stilgar, and it was kind of like the men having the meeting around the table with Duke Leto, and as the meeting ended, there was like an ominous lack of confidence among the men. It's almost like the Atreides or Duke Leto has the smell of death on him almost already. So now in this chapter, it is the Harkonnen's plan is really working its way into House Atreides and sowing seeds of distrust. So in this chapter, he has a one-on-one meeting with Thufir Hawat, and they're discussing doing a raid on Gedi Prime and destroying some of the silos. There are spice silos that they have, or spice hoards that they have. I always think of Dune 2000 with the spice silos. That's why I said silo. But the spice hoards that they have there, but leaving the emperors alone. Because the Baron's not supposed to have all this spice hoarded on Gedi Prime, so he can't admit to the destruction of something that he wasn't supposed to have in the first place. So that's why they figure they can get away with this plan to destroy his spice that he's got stockpiled. And while they're discussing this, another topic comes up that in the previous meeting, Duke Leto noticed that Hawat had something weighing heavy on him that he just couldn't bring out in front of the other men. So now he asks him what it was, and Hawat tells him about this message they intercepted by this, that the source of this message was an underground Harkonnen called Party. And the messenger had no idea what the contents of the message was, and it was partially destroyed with self-destructive acid, but they were able to get the message. And the message was warning him that Duke Leto was going to be betrayed by the one he loved, and just the knowledge of the hand that was going to come down and betray him would be enough to destroy Duke Leto. So then Duke Leto realizes that, well, they must be talking about, or he realized that Hawat must suspect Lady Jessica. And so he's right. Hawat does. And so obviously this angers Duke Leto to a certain degree, because he knows his woman. They've been together for 16 years. He knows Lady Jessica is not the one behind this. But still, I mean, they can't take any chances. So he doesn't want anyone. Then Duke Leto kind of formulates a little plan of his own in his mind. He figures, well, if he goes along with it and he acts as if he is concerned about the plan, maybe the person that's really behind it will get overconfident and slip up. And he tells Hawat to put Lady Jessica under, surveillance, but, keep it discreet. And then they're going to use Duncan, Idaho, and maybe some Fremen, take them off planet to go do this raid on Gedi Prime. And this is the interesting thing about Frank Herbert's writing, and I talked about this in previous chapters that I was reviewing in this book, is that there's a lot of things mentioned but not shown. So like this raid on Gedi Prime, if this was like a modern day novel, and this was, say, Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson were writing this book, there would be a whole chapter devoted to that Gedi Prime raid. Here in Dune, you just hear about it, but you hear a lot about action and stuff, but they don't actually show it. So that's where it kind of leaves room open for movies and stuff like that. Now, that's something that would actually be cool to see that in the upcoming Dune film, to actually see a full-out Atreides raid on Gedi Prime being led by Duncan, Idaho. That would actually be a pretty cool sequence. You could do that in a film, because you can show stuff in a film that you can't in the book or whatever, or stuff would work better on film where it's more visual than a book. But in the book, it's just mentioned, this raid, but it's not actually done. Or it's not actually shown. You just kind of hear about these things, and then and then it kind of skips over them and goes to the aftermath of whatever it was, and how the characters were reacting to it. So now we see that the Harkonnens have their threads of distrust are getting sown. You can tell that Hawat he's being led down this path, because this was intentional by the Harkonnens. They want Hawat to spend all of his energy, investigating Lady Jessica and diverting all of his attention to her, because that's the bone that they threw him. So he won't suspect the real traitor, which is Dr. Yue. And so it's a really cool. I love that whole plan within plan things, and the whole how cutthroat everything is and stuff like that. It's really cool. And even though there's not a lot of things described in Frank Herbert's Dune, it's still, I always still have a pretty visual idea of what things look like in my mind. Like I always kind of picture the main stronghold there in Arakeen as being, kind of like a more darker, gloomier place and things like that, and like the sky being a bit more darker because of the lack of moisture as described in the book, and everything kind of having more of a medieval look. Because it opens up a lot to your imagination, because Frank Herbert doesn't go into a lot of detail in describing things in his writing style, which is pretty different from some other writers. Some writers, I think, go into way too much detail. Like a good example would be Arthur C. Clarke, his 2001 Odyssey series. Now, I've read all the books in the 2001 series, but the last one, I think, was 3001 was the last book in that series. But Arthur C. Clarke goes into a lot of detail of how things look and how the technology works. Like I remember in 2001, there was a whole chapter describing how the bathroom worked on this one ship. I mean, okay, that's a cool bathroom, but please, let's just get on with the story. So this is actually something I kind of like about Frank Herbert's writing, is he doesn't spend like a lot of time going over a lot of detail of how stuff looks. He just kind of gives you just enough of what you need to picture it in your own mind, and then he just moves on with the story. So you're always getting the story. That's what I really like. And then I kind of like at the end of the chapter when Duke Leto's overlooking the sunset and how he realizes how beautiful Arrakis is, but at the same time it can be such a dangerous place, because again, you're like always reminded in the story how valuable water is, because he sees the early morning dew collectors taking the dew off the flowers. So even the dew, every scrap of moisture that can be collected, they have to collect it on Arrakis, because water is so scarce on this planet. And then the other thing they talk about in this chapter is the fact that now they're starting to realize, that Atreides are starting to realize that the Fremen are hoping that Paul is going to be this Messiah that they have been waiting for. This child of Bene Gesserit that's going to lead them to true freedom and be the voice of the outer worlds, and all about this prophecy that they have, which is cool because it's not really a prophecy at all. It was all implanted there generations ago by the Bene Gesserit themselves. They would go around to all these like worlds and plant all these like religious prophecies, so that later on when they go back, they can take advantage of that population, because they know the religion that they just planted there, and which they actually do it in the book. Jessica and Paul actually do take advantage of it. And then to a certain extent, I mean, the prophecy does come true to a certain extent, but not in the way the Bene Gesserit wanted it, or even the Fremen wanted it, for that matter, because if you read the later on books, the outcome of all this, the ultimate outcome of all this for the Fremen, it's not necessarily a good thing. And they get what they want in a lot of ways, but at the same time, their culture and their people are kind of destroyed, or almost like made irrelevant, because their whole culture is built around the environment of Arrakis, the lack of water on Arrakis. So once Arrakis gets terraformed and that's no longer a need, that culture wouldn't have the same meaning, or would start to collapse or dissolve over time. Because if the planet's this nice water, full of water, and it's this nice paradise planet, the Fremen strength is going to start to dissolve, because the generations coming after them won't have the same hardships as the one before them. And you kind of see this happen in the real world too, right? Where people that are alive now, especially like in the West, our society is pretty soft compared to society years and years and years ago, where things were a lot more manual labor, and we didn't have the kind of medical technology that we have now, things like that. So I think people just had to be stronger, and people have problems now that would have been laughed at by even by my dad's generation. You know, like they would have thought it was completely foolish. So that kind of happens with the Fremen as well as the books go on, because that's one of the themes of Dune, is that yes, mankind can affect the environment and have an impact on the environment, but the environment also affects humanity as well, and can have an effect on them and change them in certain ways, either make a people really strong if the environment's really harsh, or even make a people weak if the environment's really soft, if that makes any sense. So another interesting chapter in this book, and it's such a good book. There's always something to talk about in each chapter. So that's everything I got to say in this video. Let me know what you think in the comments section, and I will see you at the next one.